Hel- Hello, my name is Veronica Carter, or affectionately known as Coach Carter. I'm one of the district math coaches for the county, and I'm very excited to be here with you. So today we will identify and represent decimals and fraction equivalency. How are fractions and decimals related? What is a fraction? A part of a whole. What is a decimal? A part of a whole. A fraction and decimal are both part of a whole. Now, let's go back to the basics with decimals. The place value chart is below. This number that's represented is 137 and 25 hundredths. Okay, so after the decimal, the first place is considered the tenths place. The second place after that is the hundredths place. And so that's a part about base 10 system. So let's talk about that a little further. Let's start by looking at the fraction decimals in reference to the base 10 number system. One of the most relevant connections to the decimal fraction relationship with the base 10 number system is money. That's how I understand decimals better. I think of money. It takes 100 pennies to equal $1. So 100 pennies are equivalent to $1. And the way you write that is the dollar sign, zero, decimal place, 0, 1. And that says 1/100th. And that is equal to the fraction version, which is 1/100. So they're the same thing. 1/100th as a decimal is the same thing as 1/100th as a fraction. And so 10 dimes is equivalent to one whole dollar. So we know that we write it as dollar sign, 0 dot or decimal 10. And that's 10 cents. Well, 10 cents can be two things. It can be 10 pennies or it can be one dime. And so when you're looking at it as one dime, it's also equivalent to 0.1 or 1/10. 1/10 of a dollar. How many dimes does it take to make a dollar? It takes 10 dimes to make a dollar. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So 10 dimes. So one dime is 1/10 of a dollar. Okay, so that's how I relate it to decimals. Let's look at the base 10 relationship between fractions and decimals with models. And this is where you're going to see it mostly when you're working with it in school. All right, so just look at this model that is given here. It's your basic fraction model. How many parts do we have? If you count them, I'll give you a second to count. All right, so there are 10 parts, right? So the shaded part represents one of the 10 parts. So if you're writing it as a fraction, you know how to do this. It's 1/10, so it's 1/10. But it also represents the decimal of 1/10. So they are equal to each other. 1/10 as a fraction is the same as 1/10 as a decimal. All right, let's look at it this way. They look like they're the same shape, right? They are. And it looks like the same shaded part is there, but it's partitioned more. So now instead of just 10, it's 10 by 10, but the same shaded part is being represented. So when you look at this, you would call this 10/100. So 10 hundredths. As a fraction, 10/100, and as a decimal, 10 hundredths. They say the same thing, but they also have the same value. So you see that the 1/10 at the top is the same as the 10 hundredths at the bottom model. So they are equivalent to each other. Think about it. If you want to go back to the money scenario, remember how I talked about it takes 10 pennies to make one dime? Well, the top model will be your representation of one dime, 1/10 of a dollar. And the bottom version would be the 10 pennies out of 100 pennies, which is also the value of 10 cents. So they have the same value, they're just represented differently. So they are equivalent to each other. So 1/10 is the same as 10 hundredths. You got it? I know you do. Let's move to the next. What we've learned is 1/10 is equal to 10 hundredths. And that's represented by 0.1, which is also equal to 0.10. And the way you say it properly is 1/10 is equal to 10 hundredths. Got it? All right. 1/10 is the same as 1/10, which is 1/10 as a fraction, and 10 hundredths as a decimal is the same as 10/100 as a fraction. They're the same thing. All right, so let's move on. Let's apply our new knowledge by identifying all the ways the given models are equivalent with fractions and decimals. All right, give you a minute to count. All right, it's 10 parts. How many are shaded? 3. How would you write it as a fraction? 3/10, 3/10, okay? How would you write it as a decimal? 0.3, 3/10, just like that. Let's try another one. This one, if you count across the top, is 10. If you count it down the so one row is 10, one column is 10. So 10 times 10 is 100. So how many do we have in here? We have 100 here. So each row, if we count down 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. This is 50 of the 100 shaded. So 50 hundredths. So how do you write that as a fraction? Here it is, 50/100. How do you say it as a decimal? 50 hundredths. They say the same thing, 50 hundredths, both ways. But let's talk about what's also equivalent to it. Think about that model I told you before, that 50 hundredths is also going to be the same as 5/10. It's just partitioned a little bit more, but the value is the same. This is like 50 pennies with the 50/100, and the 5 dimes, they have the same value, right? So how do you write that as a decimal? 5/10. So 50 hundredths, 50 hundredths, 5/10, 5/10. But now I'm going to challenge you. I want you to just look at this model. What else could we call this model? What's another name that we can have for this model? Yes, I know you have it. It's 1/2. Half of this model is shaded. So that means that 50 hundredths, like we've learned before, 50 is half of 100, 5 is half of 10. They're all equivalent. And also, if you wanted to think of money, because that's what I do all the time with decimals, is half of a dollar is 50 cents. So it's all relative. Got it? I know you do. It's been a pleasure working with you with decimal and fraction equivalency. I hope you have fun with the practice. Enjoy your time. Take care. 1.